you may also like. A show about the things you may also like. Things like, how are you?
I am doing really well. How are you, Matt?
I'm good. I wanted to know, what is human design?
Well, do you have 10 hours? Just kidding.
We do. It's a podcast.
Just kidding. I can sum it up pretty simply. Human design is sort of a smorgasbord of a lot of different technologies, a little bit of science, a little bit of pseudoscience, as people would say, but super helpful. It's basically a map of your energy centers, which some people call chakra centers, and the way that you utilize, produce, interact with your own energy and other people's energies throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month. We all affect each other very much depending on if we're soaking in other people's emotions or being susceptible to other people's thoughts or fears or that kind of stuff. There's sort of an energy center for all of the different quote unquote feelings that you feel. And human design is a map of it. If somebody's, I guess, well versed in astrology, you'll probably really love human design. I was not that person. I'm not the hugest astrology buff or it a little bit overwhelms me. So even if you don't understand astrology, human design's almost, and I say it's like the Enneagram and astrology had a baby. So it's a little bit simpler. And when you print out your chart, it can look a little bit confusing, but just grabbing somebody like me, my podcast, my resources can put a lot of that information into layman's terms. So it's basically a blueprint, a map of your personal energy.
Do you know how it came together? Because when I hear chakras, I think yoga. Mm-hmm. When I hear astrology, obviously I think about astrology. And then, the feelings that are intertwined. How did all this come together to be sort of an amalgamation of data and data points about us? Yeah. I mean, somebody had to have sit there and said, we're going to take these things and put them together and create, and this is going to be human design.
Yes. So this is the woo-woo part of the story. My podcast is called You Do Woo, so I'm very into this kind of stuff. There's a woo-woo part of the story, the origin story of human design, and then a little bit of DNA science, like it came about in 1987. And I don't remember, I should probably write this down in my notes as whenever I share the background of human design, but I don't remember when the Human Genome Project started, but it was either around the same time or a little bit after human design came onto the scene. Now, human design apparently has always been a thing, but it wasn't until we actually started studying DNA, which is the Human Genome Project, and having computers and the internet and all of that kind of stuff, which I know wasn't in everybody's everyday life in 1987. I think we got our first computer in 89 or 90. But it was coming onto the scene as well. So the origin story, woo-woo style, is the founder of human design. He's actually Canadian. He passed, I think, in early 2000s, but he was in Ibiza, Spain. I don't know if he was doing drugs. I'm not sure what the deal was. I don't know if he was doing DMT or LSD to connect to God or what. He wasn't setting out to get any information, but all of the sudden, it was January, some early day in January 1987, that he started getting these downloads. He was actually either an atheist or agnostic, didn't believe in God. So it wasn't like God was, probably like a fundamentalist Christian would say, God told me these things, so he didn't really put the label God on it. He called it the voice, but there was all of this information being given to him, and he wrote it all down. And I think that he was pretty quiet about it for several years. because he thought he was crazy. Like he had all of this information. He wasn't a scientist. I think he worked in advertising actually. Um, he didn't know about all of the DNA research that was going on at the time and all that kind of stuff. But there was a lot of information, not only about how the world was getting ready to change in 30 years from then, that was 87. The sort of shifting point, apparently, according to human design, is 2027. But there was also some changes in our DNA as humans that was going to start happening. And he wrote all of this information down and then didn't start actually talking about it. Like publicly, like worldwide, I think for about 7 years. And that was once the internet was a thing and it was able to spread pretty fast. I think it was only really in the true woo woo community at that time and it was pretty underground. My one of my human design teachers actually studied directly with him, with Ra Uruhu, the founder of human design, and said he was a pretty interesting character. So when I first so that's sort of the woo woo origin story. The scientific origin story is that all this information came out. A lot of the information started lining up pretty accurately with the Human Genome Project and what they were finding and the different strands of DNA and what are activated, what we know their job is, and then what the trash DNA is all about, quote unquote trash DNA. It all has like we're finding out every day more and more about the DNA that they thought was useless, but that is actually doing something for us as a human race. And that kind of stuff started lining up. So I think that gave it a little bit more credibility where it was like, okay, I don't know who told this information to this dude, but it matched exactly with what the scientists were finding out about in the Human Genome Project. So there's the way that the science goes is there are particles that come from the sun. I forget the name of them now. Neutrinos. They're a little bit different than photons, like actual light particles, because light particles that we learn about just I might have learned about neutrinos in junior high and high school. I don't remember. I wasn't a big science person. But the neutrinos that come from the sun can pass through like cement walls, whereas photons can't. You know, you close up a room, it gets dark, and if there's no light, you can like block out all the light. Neutrinos can get through walls and cement and all of that kind of stuff. So around, I think it was around the year 2000, and then again a lot more in 2012, and then more in 2020. And these are things you can look up honestly on NASA's website, like all of the history of this. More and more solar flares started happening. The intensity of neutrinos that are coming to Earth are increasing rapidly. Some people think that it's doing something, weird climate wise or whatever, but like this is actually something that always happens. It happens, I think, every like 11,000 years. But right now it's like more intense than ever before. And apparently those are the quote unquote light codes and extra light that is coming to activate some of the quote unquote trash DNA we have. So it's really interesting to be on the woo woo side. And I do a lot more than just human design. I do business coaching, spiritual life coaching, all of that kind of stuff. But human design wise, it's really interesting to see over the past few years the two worlds mesh between spirituality and like what all this can do for you and the chakras. Like it's the same chakra system as yoga. So human design brings in that chakra system. It brings in a little bit of the truths from Kabbalah, which is a mystical Jewish tradition. It brings in some of the technology from the I Ching and astrology. There's just a whole like melting pot of different things that it pulls from. But the DNA aspect of it and the neutrinos and what all has been changing over the past 20 years or so is a really interesting one to watch lately. So that's sort of the deep dive of the origin story for you.
How did you become attracted to this? What was it? Was it one thing, many things that encouraged you to become involved with human design?
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a personal background story. I'm from Texas. I grew up in the Bible Belt and grew up in the Christian faith. It wasn't, I don't have a whole lot of, I guess, trauma that some people have that have grown up religious. Mine was pretty mellow and a little bit watered down and sort of like what I needed. There wasn't a whole lot of like fire and brimstone. It was a lot of teachings of love and Jesus's teachings and all of that. So that was my upbringing. But then when I got into college and beyond college, I joined a church that in Austin that was pretty fundamentalist, and it started just like really rubbing me the wrong way. So I chose to leave the church at that time. I didn't really leave my faith, but I just since then haven't gone to church other than going and exploring really cool churches in Europe, but I haven't sat through a church service, you know. Um, so I think that when I turned 30, I'm turning 41 this year. When I turned 30, I started really missing the spiritual aspect, I think, of growing up in the church and religion and all of that. But I was very much not interested in going back to find a church that fit. I just didn't feel like maybe that exists, but it didn't feel like that was the path that I wanted to take. I wanted to go a little bit more into spirituality. So I started reading a lot of books of people who some who like used to be Christian and then sort of formed their own type of belief system. I knew that I wanted to have kids and I knew that I didn't want to raise them in the church, but I did want to help them in whatever way I could to connect with their higher self or God or their soul or whatever they choose to believe in or not believe in, and just like study all the different religions and the history of those and all that kind of stuff. So I started doing that sort of for myself before even getting married and having a family. And it was in my early 30s that I heard about human design on a podcast. So podcasts are super powerful in that way. And I actually looked up that what type I was. There's 5 energy types. And I looked it up and we'll get to this in a second, but I, like Matt, am a generator, which is like the most common type, but there's a lot of interesting things about it that really, really resonated. And I sort of took all of those things, but then I left it. I didn't learn about human design as a whole. I didn't learn about the other types. I just took the things that benefited me, I think, on a daily basis and ran with it. And then I got pregnant in 2018 and I had my daughter in 2019. And when she was born, I was, little backstory, I was working in the music industry at that time. I was actually a business manager in the country music industry. So I had a business that I worked with a lot of clients in Nashville, Tennessee, and then Austin, Texas. So that's what I was doing. And I had my baby in 2019 and we were in the hospital, and it's very boring sitting in the hospital waiting to be let go home and all that kind of stuff. So I was on my phone and was like, oh, I should look up her human design, just see what she is. And I looked it up and she was, this type is called a reflector and it's less than 1% of the population. And I was like, Jesus, okay, this is cool. Great. And reflectors are very, in the history of like reflectors, and I need to go find who like examples of some reflectors so I can give you all an idea. But reflectors are a lot of times really, really sensitive. They can sometimes hermit and just like get away from the rest of humanity. They are super empaths. They can be psychic sometimes. So I mean, I was very low on sleep. I was exhausted. I was just all of the things, super emotional. And I started crying in the hospital bed because I was like, oh my God, of course I have a reflector child. I don't know how to raise this child. Basically, a generator and a reflector are complete opposites. So I'm just like, I don't know what to do. So at that point, I started slowly studying the other types and human design as a whole, just so that I could be a better parent in raising this little child who's apparently going to be super, super sensitive. What's interesting is that as I've dove into human design more, it's a lot more nuanced than that. And my daughter is actually much more extroverted than me, much more determined, and she's sensitive, but not in the ways that you think. She's a very strong, strong spirit, and I actually had nothing to worry about. So I feel like that all came to be for a reason. So, anyways, I started studying it. That was like October, November 2019. I came back from maternity leave a few weeks before COVID hit. And the music industry, most people know, like a lot of the certain industries that were hit really hard, music industry was one of the hardest hit because they couldn't go out and play. They couldn't go out and play their concerts and everything. So I got put on unemployment for 6 months, maybe a little bit longer, but everything just paused, which was a blessing because I was able to spend more time with my child. There was a lot of life stuff happening. I was able to spend more time with my parents and have them spend more time with my daughter. And I was able to take some time to really think about, like, what do I want to do? And in the back of my head, I was like, I could just never have a music industry job again. Like, this could be done. All of us sort of were in that limbo state where we're like, what, is the world going to go back to normal? Or it hasn't totally, but in some ways it has, but we didn't know. So I was like, holy crap, what do I do? I had been talking more and more about human design to friends and family, and people were really interested in it, especially since one of the sort of prophecies, I guess, that human design talks about is 2027 is this shift in humanity. They call it the new paradigm, but it's a shift in our DNA and the way that we interact with each other. A lot of different changes are apparently going to happen. 2020 was the year that those things started happening because human design teaches that it takes 7 years to sort of make a full change to quote unquote decondition from a program. And so the prophecy was always that 2020 was going to be some big event that started off this 7 year basically change to a new type of living for us as humans, which I know not a ton of things changed, but a lot of people started working from home. A lot of people moved. A lot of people switched careers. Like, so many different things, good and bad, happened in 2020. So I especially was like, okay, because when I first started learning about it, I was like, I'm gonna take what helps me and like leave the rest. I'm not. I don't know. Whenever there was the whole like the world's gonna end in the year 2000. Like all of we've been through lots of these things, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm taking all this with a grain of salt. But when that happened in March of 2020, I was like, oh, maybe there is some truth to some of this. Let's see how this plays out. I started doing mini readings for friends and family, just a chart reading, like a quick 20-minute overview of it. Everybody I talked to was like, you're really good at this. Like, this is so interesting. You should do this as a job. And I was like, well, let's see. Like, let's see if I get my music industry job back and all that kind of stuff. But I actually had so many people asking such similar questions and coming to me with like, okay, what does it mean when you're a generator and you have this and blah, blah, blah. And that's why I started a podcast. I didn't start a podcast intending, we're at 200 episodes now. Like, I didn't know how, I thought I would just like record several things and have it be there as a resource so that I didn't have to waste time explaining things over and over. So I have I have episodes for everything. And then it ended up growing, especially once the music industry opened back up in 2021. And I was like, okay, I don't really want to do this anymore. Like, I just don't want to. And I just pivoted into doing the podcast and business coaching and human design coaching. I, at that point, was like, okay, this could actually be bigger than it is. And I think I started having you produce my show like at some point in 2021. And then I even did it was just a human design podcast. And then I rebranded to You Do Woo. And we talk about much more than human design now. So that's sort of background.
Tell me a little bit about the rebrand. Originally, it was called Align Designs. I like that title because I could understand something. And then you went to You Do Woo, and I said, okay, so it's rebranding to something that's a little bit deeper that's woo. Now I don't really understand it. I don't want to. I was skeptical of that rebrand.
Yeah.
Yet it's turned out to be what a lot of podcasters should do, and that's niche down a little bit. Align Designs is great. I understand it, but you took it a little deeper into woo. And so tell me a little bit about that rebrand, because I always think I know things. That was one thing where I said, yeah, I really don't know, so I'm just going to watch.
Yeah. So when I chose Align Designs, I really just was choosing a title so that I could put it out there. And I didn't want to do like the Allison Cullen show. Like I wanted it different than me. And so I very much used total logic, just my brain. I sort of made like a whole brain dump list of possible names. I knew I wanted design to be in it just because human design. And alignment is a big part of human design, in that human design can sort of help you to figure out all the different facets of your life and what is most aligned for you, more on a like true soul level, not just like what your ego wants. Like the music industry job was very ego based. I'm a musician. I play the flute. I love music, but working in the music industry was I chose that for my ego. Like 100%. It paid well. It was a cool job. Got to travel, got to go see a lot of concerts, got to know a lot of awesome people. You felt special. So it was a total ego job. This human design and podcasting is not ego. It's honestly, especially living in like a small Christian conservative town in Texas, it's like, I don't want to tell you what I do. Like it's very much not like a bragging thing, an ego thing. And so alignment is basically getting on track with your true soul, purpose, calling, all that kind of stuff, not just what looks good on paper or what will make your dad happier or what sounds fun for a resume kind of thing. So the Align Designs came from that. In October 2021, I actually did a small group coaching container with some of my friends, and they actually do podcast coaching, the Almost 30 Gals. They were based in LA. Now I think one moved to New York and one's in LA. They've had their show for several years now, very successful, especially in the like spiritual woo-woo world. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take this course and figure out how to up level, because I was sort of at a plateau business wise at that time. And I just was like, okay, I want something like these girls have, so let me get some one-on-one coaching for them. And one of the weeks, it was like a 6-week course, and like week 2 or 3, it was all about connecting to the soul of your show. And I was like, well, this is weird. Like the show is me. I'm the show. I get to decide all things. Like I get to decide what I want to talk about and all that kind of stuff. And this was actually sort of interesting because when they had like a meditation they walked you through, very woo-woo, very like out there. But it was interesting because like when I got into that meditation, it wasn't like an audible voice, but it was just this like sort of feeling of like, this is not the name of your show. Align Designs is not it. I am something else, and I am something that is going to be helpful for a lot of people beyond human design. And it was like there was like several goals that it had. One was to get me to not take myself so seriously and actually to be speaking on the show about some of the hardships I'm going through, rather than just saying, I've got it all figured out. Here's what you do. Here's how you use human design. Like the show sort of wanted me to be a little bit more vulnerable and transparent and show that I'm just a human because I very much have like, um, I'm first child. I did really well in school. I have very much have like teacher coach vibes, and that's fine and helpful. But really, and human design teaches this too. The leaders in this next era of humanity are going to be the leaders who are really, I guess, humble and don't act like a guru, don't act like they have all their shit figured out, like all that kind of stuff. So the show, the soul of my show, wanted me to do that and to learn how to have fun and to learn how to enjoy the journey. And it was like that kind of vibe. And then at the end of the meditation, it was like, you do woo. And I was like, seriously? Like, that is the weirdest name. And I told Lindsay Simsick, who's one of the hosts of Almost 30, she was like, Allison, go trademark that right now. She was like, that is the coolest name ever. I'm a little bit jealous. And just, yes, that's what you need to do. And I felt that when it said that, I was like, okay, well, that's your name, whatever. It's almost like if you have a child and then the child's like, this is what you're going to be naming me. And you're like, I've never thought of that name before, but okay. Um, so that obviously it came in a woo woo way, came through a meditation, spoke to me as far as what it wanted to be called and what it wanted to grow into. And there's been a lot of growing pains, and I'm still learning a lot of things, but as a whole, its purpose and mission hasn't changed. I just probably need to come back to that every once in a while. But it is interesting because even like not non woo woo people, when they find out the name, they're like, that's a really cool name. Like, that's really interesting. So,
So there's a lot of podcast coaches out there. Most are frauds. I can tell you that these ones are good because I've managed to watch your numbers grow over the years. And, that rebrand, there's two things about podcasting. One is if you get to know your audience really, really well, they're going to start to shape your brand. And the other thing was if you can be vulnerable and authentic and carry a degree of empathy inside your show, it will attract people. So whatever they're doing is the right thing to do. I can say that. So, and I'll put a link in the show notes if anybody wants to reach out and connect to that if it's still going and whatnot. I do want to ask you, though, about the community that has grown out of that change. And so you've got an entire community. So tell me about the You Do Woo community.
yes. So that was October 2021. I feel like it took until sort of the spring of 2022 to really gain some traction. And that was actually when I started my first online community. I had a mastermind. So it was a smaller group of women. Like, it was always between 10 or 15 women in there. And we met weekly. And that was honest. I mean, it wasn't all of my listeners, but it was a lot. Like, I feel like those women it's mainly women who listen to my podcast. There's some men, but those women, 15 women, very much represented my listener base as a whole. And it was really neat to be in there. We actually spoke on a daily basis because we had a Voxer. It's almost like a WhatsApp chat going all the time. And then we met on Zoom once a week. So that was all of 2022. And then 2023 was when I started my membership. So that's it's not as much as a mastermind. Like, a mastermind is sort of people coming in, very much getting business coaching, being in their business, all of that kind of stuff. And then the membership is a little bit more, we meet once a week, but it's talking about all life stuff. And it's a larger group, and that felt really good because even though I'm a really good business coach, I knew that so many more people than just entrepreneurs need support at this time. So in the membership, they're able to come in and ask business questions too, ask human design questions, talk about life stuff, marriage, parenting, like all the things. And it feels a lot more, I don't know, it's not niched down as much. It's much more broad, but I feel like I'm able to help a whole lot more people. And we also had, a year ago now, we had our first retreat. So that was really fun. We had a retreat here in the hill country, and being able to like actually see and hang out with people in real life was such a big deal, because so much of our community over the past 5 years now has been online community, which is super helpful and easy. And, you don't have to travel or make plans to meet in person and all that kind of stuff. But I really do feel like we're missing out on the in-person community a lot lately. And that's one thing that because of the retreat last year, we're going to be planning another retreat soon. I've been planning a lot more just small in-person meetups, and that has been really, really huge. And it was interesting too, because I had a gal somebody gifted me a tarot card reading. I had never done tarot cards before. It's another woo-woo thing. I didn't really know what I was getting into, but this lady's she's been a psychiatrist for 30 years, and she's now adding tarot to her psychiatry practice, which is really interesting. And I was like, cool, this will be interesting, because it's not just this, like, I don't know, 80-year-old lady that lives on Maui who's just real woo-woo reading your cards for you. It's like a psychiatrist who knows the human brain and the psychology and everything. And that was fascinating. I got that done in April of this year. And she actually said, she goes, your business is going to grow from in-person meetups and in like real life relationships. I was like, wow. And I know we've talked about this too. And I started a YouTube channel, gonna start doing all the video and all of that kind of stuff and taking advantage of that, which I know will be a big up level. And it's weird, because the in-person events that we've been doing here in Texas, the like word of mouth has been growing a lot more, because they'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm friends with this Allison girl. She has this podcast. You should listen to it, blah, blah, blah. And that's been really, really neat to see that actually working. Because for, all of us in the podcasting world or coaching world for the past like 10 or 15 years, we've all been taught like utilize Instagram, utilize the internet to grow. And obviously so, but now I think that just that craving of human connection is so intense that I'm realizing like people need that. And one of the cool things I've been doing in my community is like helping people who live near each other meet up. Like we have all these Canadian girls who do meetups, and we have girls outside of Sedona, Arizona, who do meetups. And like I've been able to connect people even though I'm not there. Like I consider myself a connector, a resourcer. So I'm able to do that even with just putting people together to be like, y'all should go get coffee together. So yeah, that's been the vibe of the community.
So when somebody wants to explore their human design, and this is going to be the fun part of the show, because you've done mine. There you go. That's me. Okay. So give me top line and walk me through, because this is the result of what happens after I provide you with my birthday and the location and the time that I was born. And from this, you've been able to extract my human design. So what do you see?
Yep. Okay. So one thing I'm going to send you, Matt, as well, so that people can sort of do this for themselves. If they want to book a reading, I'll totally do a reading for you. It's really fun, and we can do a 1-hour deep dive. But I also have very simple cheat sheets, and we'll sort of go over what is involved in the cheat sheet, and I can explain your chart based on those few things. So the type is generator, which is what I am as well. And the profile are the first two things that I love looking at. So there are 5 types in human design. There are generators and manifesting generators, which make up about 70% of the population. And these people are what you would think of. It's sort of like how we've been told to live, the past 150 years or so. It's these people have a lot of life force energy. You are here to do, you're not meant to just work all of your life, but these people do tend to have more of that workhorse mentality, a little bit more drive and motivation and all of that kind of stuff. The whole like just do it vibe. That's the generator and manifesting generator. We get, when you do a chart reading, we get a lot more nuanced because you can look into all of these shapes. As you can see, Matt has a few that are lit up or colored. So like the top two at the very top, and then several of the middle energy centers or chakra centers are lit up. The ones that are open or white, he's got the square, the white square, which is his throat center. He's got the white diamond, which is your G center, and then the white root, which is at the very, very bottom, the square. Those each very much mean something too. It's sort of, when it's white, it means you're a little bit more affected by external situations or other people in those energy centers. So an open root center at the very bottom means that you can be very affected by other people's time pressures and putting pressure on you and getting you to hurry and all of that kind of stuff. Whereas somebody who has that defined might be somebody who does well with time pressure and wanting like daily deadlines and like all that kind of stuff. Or for you, it's a little bit better to just go with the flow. Don't let other people rush you, all of that kind of stuff. The G center in the middle, the diamond, when somebody has this open, it's really interesting because their environment is very, very important to their work and productivity. Like it needs to be decluttered. They need to be like, I'm not this way. I have a defined G center and you should see my desk right now. Like there's crap all over it. Matt, I'd be interested to see what yours is. For somebody like you work better with it being clear.
I actually have piles. So they're just not in front of me.
They're organized. They're not.
Yeah, it's organized chaos.
There you go. Also for somebody like you, if you're lacking motivation or feeling stagnant or just not feeling like there's forward momentum, a lot of times changing your environment can be good, whether that's going and doing admin work at a coffee shop. I know you can't record a podcast at a coffee shop, but doing emails or something like that at a beautiful bar or coffee shop or poolside resort or something like that. That's a really big deal for people with an open G center. So there's...
Oh, when I get tired of something, I get up and walk and go somewhere else. I change the channel.
Yeah, you definitely have to have that change in environment, and the environment's a big deal too. Like you could walk into a restaurant and like my husband has this, he has an open G center like you, and there's been times where we've walked into like a Mexican restaurant and he's like, nope, we gotta leave. Like it's not, I'm like, we've never even been here before, can we try the food? And he's like, it doesn't feel right, like I just want to leave. So it's that like feeling of like knowing whether your environment is correct for you or not. You're very sensitive to that, which is cool. If you look, and this is the last little chakra center I'll talk about, and then we'll go back to the types. But if you look at there's a small red triangle. That is called the heart or ego center. It has number 26 lit up and number 40 lit up. Those are really interesting because this is your heart or ego center. It's not really like ego, like you're egotistical or anything. It's not that. It's sort of like where your willpower and motivation comes from. 26 means that you very much are meant to be your own boss, not have somebody, micromanaging you. And 26 is big on spoken word, which is really interesting because you have that lit up. And then 40 is all about fame. So this is being really well known, very well connected, it doesn't have to be like you have 11 million followers on Instagram, but it can be, you have your podcast platform, you have your company that's very well known for podcast production, like all of that. 40 is when you really activate this 40, you are very, very well known for what you do. So
wow, you've hit everything. It's very, very true. And I did not like to be micromanaged. And when it happened, I did flip and I became my own boss and started to really enjoy that. And yeah, there were time. It's funny. You also talked about the time pressures. I did not like the time pressures, and so many of these, parts of me. It's funny because I really wanted the 40. I really wanted the to be well known, and the path I took. You know, there were a lot of pressures, and there was a lot of micromanaging that was involved with it, and in the end, it did sort of lead me to, becoming my own boss, just as you mentioned.
Yeah. So that's
Wow.
pretty cool. And then I also love to look at the profile. So the profile's right next to the type, and yours is a 4-1, which I think I've only done a reading for one other person with a 4-1 profile. There's 12 profiles, but the 4-1 is the most rare. Only like 2% of the population have this profile. And if you're someone who believes in reincarnation and that we have several lives and we sort of die and then come back and die and come back. By the way, if anybody's listening that wants to dive deeper into that, there's an amazing book called The Journey of Souls that I really, really highly recommend. It's written by a psychiatrist who, I think in like the 30s and 40s, he was doing hypnotism on his clients to like get them to stop smoking or, health things or whatever. And he ended up accidentally regressing them to times in between their lives. And there's so many interesting cases. He has thousands of cases that he wrote about in there. So if that's something where you're like, oh, I want to find out more about that, or I'm not sure what I believe, or I totally believe that and I want to dive in deeper, it's very objective, but very, very interesting. So if you believe in reincarnation, then this profile is super interesting because it's almost considered a bonus life. And if you did have past lives, you've cleaned up a lot of your karma, which is really cool. And you're able to see that, like, you're able to see sort of the gray areas in the world. So much is like very polarized, like right, left, good, bad, whatever. And you're very much here to remind people of like the higher perspective, that like the purpose of life is to freaking have fun and to love and be loved and to enjoy yourself. And that's what the 4-1 is meant to do. Does that resonate for you at all?
Oh, absolutely. I kind of figure that, instead of, I don't spend a lot of time with black, white, left, right. I kind of feel at times I'm I'm like the Jehovah's Witness, where I try to bring both sides together to sort of sell people on both sides of something. And, let's take another look at that in a different, in a more particular way.
Yeah.
I did have a question. What is not self-theme? So in the corner, you've got the word frustration up here in the top. What is that?
So not self-theme is every generator or manifesting generator, when they're not aligned with their energy, the not self-theme of frustration will come up. So when you're feeling frustration, and the point is not to never feel frustration, it's just to notice it when it comes up and say, okay, I've been doing something wrong. I need to change something. And frustration, for me, sometimes it comes up in that feeling of like anger frustration, but a lot of times it comes up that the true definition of frustration is like stuckness. You feel like you're stuck, you're not moving forward, you're in limbo, there's no clarity. That's how it comes up most of the time. Sometimes it comes up in anger. So, but when you're feeling frustration as a generator, you want to go look and say, have I said yes to things that I didn't want to do? Right? Now, we can't do this 100% of the time in the matrix world that we're living in right now. There's some things, pay bills, pay taxes, there's stuff that we have to quote unquote do. But when you start learning about human design, you can use this just in baby steps. So you can start doing little things. So if somebody asks you to go get coffee and you don't want to go get coffee with them, say, this week's not a good time. Let me get back to you, right? Start saying no more instead of yes. If it's not a heck yes, then it's a no for right now. So if you're saying yes too much, or if you're doing too many things that you don't want to do, and you're not doing enough things that really give you more energy and light you up and help you feel excited, then you might go to frustration. A lot of times, my personal human design mentor, her name is Jenna Zoe, and she has a really great podcast called My Human Design, I think. Anyways, highly recommend it. She always says that the reason that the world is so screwed up is because generators aren't doing things that make them feel good. We're in jobs that are like just draining our life force energy. We're like being a martyr and a victim. We're helping too many other people without helping ourselves first. So generators are why the world's so screwed up. If we can have more generators, because remember, there's 70% of the population is generators or manifesting generators. If we can have all of those people be doing on a daily basis many things that feel good and light them up and make them excited and give them life force energy, it'll automatically tip the scales worldwide to make the world a better place.
I sort of think, okay, so if generators can fix the world, I think it's likely because of all the self-indulgent pieces of the last 20 years that have forced people inside that have probably taken generators off their game, which is why we've got the world that we've got right now, right? Mm-hmm. Just something that crossed my mind.
Yeah.
What about the celebrity aspect? I mean, it's fun. You mentioned it earlier. You were talking about your daughter, and you were looking for, did you say she was a reflector?
A reflector, yes. I'm trying to.
Yeah, so I looked up some reflectors. Sandra Bullock is a reflector.
Yes.
Yul Brynner.
Yes.
I mean, I guess the celebrity part it's a fun aspect, isn't it? To go and...
It is interesting because a lot of times you can see some of those things. Like Sandra Bullock is pretty, I think she lives in, or for a time she lived in Austin, like right down the street from where I lived. She's pretty off the map. Like she's not all, and her whole life she's been that way. Like not in the public eye very much, like sort of doing her own thing, that kind of thing. Reflectors are interesting because they can sort of everyday sample different types. Like they could be a generator one day, a manifestor one day, a projector one day. So yeah, it's really cool. I think in most of my episodes where I talk about each type, which you can get the link to from my cheat sheets, which I'll give to you, Matt, to put in there. You can see different celebrities that are also your type. And I have it also in the profiles. You can see different celebrities that are your same profile. So like for you, for the 4-1, we have Bette Midler, Stevie Wonder, Barbara Walters, Louis Vuitton, Gianni Versace. There's others, but those are interesting ones. I don't know many of those super well. And I don't know that you'd have to, for a 4-1, you'd have to know them on like a really personal level to probably see that aspect in them. But it's pretty cool. So everybody listening, definitely go listen to your profile episode because I do a deep dive into that, into celebrities that match you too.
Yeah, I think when I was listening back to those and producing them, I thought to myself, well, which one am I? And I think that sort of led me to asking you today to let's just talk about this. Today, by the way, is the 25th birthday of my twin boys.
Oh.
And it just by coincidence, here we are today. But I did have, after I submitted to you, here's my birthday, here's the time that they were born, or that I was born. But what happens with twins?
Yeah.
I mean, do they have the exact same human design?
Yep.
And what if they're fraternal and what if they're identical? Does that matter?
Yeah. So I've only done human design readings for 2 sets of twins. One set had, I don't know if they were fraternal. That is a good question. So I don't know about that. But one set had the exact same chart. Another set had the same type and profile, but a different incarnation cross, because sometimes minute by minute, it changes things in your chart. So with the twins that had the same exact chart, that does happen sometimes. Often it happens with twins or people born at the same time in the same city. Because basically, a few of the things that the chart is measuring is how many of those, what I talked about before, neutrinos are coming in at to Earth at the second that you take your first breath. So, and depending on where you are on Earth and all that kind of stuff. So with those gals, they were like, well, what does that mean? Are we the same person? Like, do we have all of the same personality and all of that kind of stuff? With a chart, because the girls that I did that Zoom with, they were like, we feel like we're very different, yet we have the same chart. So there's a few different things about that. One, some people are much more prone to the conditioning of the world. Like with you, somebody else who has the exact same chart might have stayed at that old job, with a boss, doing something they didn't want to do, and would have a different personality because of that, right? Because of not following their true calling and what their soul was telling them to do. They want to make sure they get that paycheck and those benefits, and they don't care if the boss is telling them what. I mean, it bothers them on the inside, but for paper's sake, that's what they want to do, right? So if people are a little bit more prone to conditioning or follow the conditioning that goes against who they really are, they'll end up having a different personality. We all see this. We are getting inundated on Instagram by polarizing information, and it is affecting the way that you think about things, the way that you think about other people. It's affecting your personality. However, if you stay away from all of that, you'd have a pretty clear perspective of things and you could go inside, right? So there's that. And there's also in Kabbalah, which is, it predates all of the religions actually, but for some reason, Judaism has sort of embraced it on a certain level. So a lot of Jewish people do practice Kabbalah. However, it's not meant just for Jewish people. It's meant for everybody. In Kabbalah, which is part of human design as well, they do teach that sometimes if a soul has a lot of cleanup to do, they will go in to for their next life and divide, whether it's twins or two people on different parts of the world. It's the same soul divided so that they can sort of get their cleanup work. In Kabbalah, it's called tikkun. They can get their cleanup done faster and easier with two humans working on it. Now, I don't know if this is real or not. It is just a theory, but that with those twins, I was like, maybe y'all are the same soul, exact same soul that divided into two to each sort of have a different path to work on things so that at the end of this life, you can come back and be a cleaner soul with less karma like you have, Matt, for your next lifetime. Are your boys the same exact, or do they have some?
No, they're pretty different.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. How are you preparing for 2027?
If you would have asked me that when I first started teaching about that, I would have had a whole list for you. Now that we're like 4 years in to all the changes, I'm taking it day by day, honestly. There's so many things that are said are going to be changing in 2027. Some of the people who study the new paradigm are a little bit like doomsday. I don't prescribe to that. I just don't think it's helpful. I don't think it's, helpful to be 100% prepper and think that we're going to have like a nuclear fallout and all of that kind of stuff. That doesn't make my today better. However, some things I'm personally doing are being more self-reliant, just period. Like we are gardening and we get a lot of our produce from our garden, which has felt really cool. I'm making a lot of connections in community and buying things from local farmers instead of the grocery store. I'm doing a lot of trades. So several of the things that probably eventually, whether it's in the next 3 years or the next 100 or 200 years, just because of climate change and technology and all of that, so many things are going to either go away or change. People are talking about, the banking system is going to change. Our food system is going to change. All of these things. So instead of looking at each of those changes in a doomsday perspective, I say, what is the way I want this to go? And what things can I do to prepare now? So first of all, I just found this out. Texas created its own stock market. Like, what? Did you know that? That's a recent thing my husband just told me. So changes are afoot. I don't even know. I don't know if Texas is going to be the best place to live right now in the next few years. I have heard many things about crazy changes that could happen, but whatever, we're here. That's where we are. However, so money that is maybe in the stock market, maybe you change it around to where it's mostly in index funds, or you take some out and buy a piece of land or things like that. Those are things that we're talking about. Mainly community, self-reliance, and, moving money around a little bit to where it's not 100% all in the volatile parts of the stock market, because I do think some things with that will change. And really, when you get a human design reading or you check out the cheat sheet, following your strategy. So for you and I, Matt, a generator's strategy is to respond. So that basically means letting things come to you, whether that's somebody asking you to be on their podcast or, being invited to a dinner or whatever. Look for invitations and things that are coming to you and really use your gut to decide whether it's right or not. Not like, oh, if I was on this person's podcast, it would, put me in front of 10 million new people, but you don't really like the person and you don't feel like you'd have a good conversation. Well, then you should say no to that. You know what I mean? It's responding with your gut instinct instead of your logical brain as much as possible, and creating some open space, right? So a lot of times I'll leave my Wednesday mornings totally open so that either if I feel like it that day, I can play catch up on admin stuff, but I don't book anything on Wednesday mornings for the most part, so that I can have some open space in my calendar to allow things to come in that I can then respond to or put those things there. A lot of times we just pack our calendars so we can't even say yes to something that we want to say yes to, right? So that's a good baby step change that people can make as well. If with 2027, honestly, learning about your human design and starting to make small daily decisions based on your strategy and authority, which I go over in the cheat sheets, will get you, it will change so many things for the better. I always joke that when people find human design, if they start applying it to their everyday life, you have sort of a 90-day beginner's luck period where a lot of different fun things happen and change, and you make new connections, and there's a lot that opens up for you. Not that it doesn't continue, but really the first 3 months or so of learning human design, there's a lot that pops up for you, which is really, really cool.
For those who are watching this on the video, the podcast is on the hat. Yep. That's a great piece of merch, by the way. It's called You Do Woo. And for the rest of you, everything's in the show notes, including the cheat sheets and where you can listen to the episodes, including your human design and how to discover what your human design is and all the connection points to Allison. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me, Matt. It was fun to sort of get a little overview of your chart, too.
Thanks for listening to You May Also Like. You may also like our website at youmayalsolike.net. The show is produced by Evan Serminski and built for your ears by everyone at the Sound Off Media Company.